Hi, I'm the Asian sensation Kanji. You're listening to Queen's Court.
Hi guys, this is the Queen of Queens Visage talking, and I am so happy to introduce you to the Queen's Court.
All right, everyone, welcome to the second episode of Queeny Suggests right here on Queen's Court. And I'm super excited to welcome these two today to the castle. From Wrestling Winedown, I have Hayleigh and Lo. Ladies, welcome. How are you doing?
We're good.
Good. I'm so glad to have you. This is a really special series to me. The first episode just released last week, and I'm so happy to have you both here to share your podcast with my listeners and as many people as I could possibly get. So that's my goal. I just want to start off with letting everyone get to know you two a little bit. If they haven't heard your show before or found you on Twitter yet, they will today. So tell us a little bit about yourselves.
So I'm Lo, along with Hayleigh. So I was born and raised in Las Vegas, and I've been a wrestling fan since I was 11 or 12. Just stumbled across it one day. I was at my grandma's house, and Raw was on the Spanish channel. And I don't speak Spanish, but I was just like, oh, this looks interesting. So I watched it, and then the next week I watched it, and the next week, and I was just really interested in it. And it was weird because I was scared to tell my mom because I thought it was what is a male-dominated sport. And I was just like, oh, God, what is she going to think? And I remember telling her, and she was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I like wrestling. And she was fine with it. I ended up finding out my oldest cousin, DeAndre, he's really into wrestling. So that made us bond. And we always go to the live events together. So that's how I got into wrestling.
Yeah, my name is Hayleigh. I'm also born and raised in Las Vegas. I just also came across wrestling. I just stumbled upon it, but only about 2 or 3 years ago. So my sister and I were just really bored on a Monday night watching TV. We were like, WWE, what? We've always heard of it, but never watched it. And we thought it was so fun. We were just laughing the whole time. We were being the commentators. And we were so into it. So we did that Tuesday night, and literally every week after that. That's how I got super into it. Yeah, and then the way we found out that we were both into wrestling was I tweeted something about liking WWE, don't judge me. And then Lo was like, oh my God, me too. And then here we are today.
And here you are today. Isn't that the best? Wrestling brings people together. That's one of my most favorite parts about it is you low-key don't expect all these people to be like, yeah, same. I feel the same way. I think that's great. So now that we know what got you into wrestling and how you two connected, what's really exciting you about this awesome world that we're involved in? What's keeping you excited about wrestling?
For me, I'm really liking how NXT is going currently. I really liked how they were involved in Survivor Series and how they aren't just seen as a developmental brand anymore. They're seen as their own brand, and they're, in my opinion, much better than Raw and SmackDown. I feel like the superstars there, they're so talented, and they just know how to put on a good show in person, on television, wherever you're watching. I also think the inception of AEW was something that really drew me in as well. Their first real pay-per-view was here in Las Vegas, and I went, and just the atmosphere was really welcoming, and seeing how they had everything designed. I think everyone expected them to fail for some reason, and the way they had the arena set up, the way their superstars wrestled, the way everything, the production, it just looked amazing. It looked like they had been doing it for years, and that really stuck to me. And the women's division, of course, but ups and downs.
Right.
Indeed.
So I just love all the characters in WWE. I think that it's really interesting to see where they start and where they end up, and just how they work together. And people always judge WWE because they're like, it's fake or whatever. But really, it's the character development that's like the best part of the entire show. And just being able to get to know them and follow along their storyline. That's what keeps me interested.
It's a lot of great storytelling. It's a lot of character work. And what I feel like a lot of people fail to understand in wrestling, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but they're like, they give you that whole fake thing, but they don't understand the development and the creation of what's going on. Yeah, okay, it's scripted, whatever, but so is every movie you ever watch. So is every TV show you ever watch, right? And it's just, we have a sport that's like sprinkled on the top, right? They're sports entertainers. I feel like people have a really difficult time trying to understand what that means.
I think for us, too, being journalism majors in college, and Hayleigh was a film minor, she is. I think it's interesting to us because that's our field.
Right.
We see creative stuff going on all the time in our work or our school. So that's what really makes me interested in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I could definitely see that coming from your background. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense. I wish people would understand that a little bit more, but that's okay. We'll get there, I think, at some point.
Yeah.
Especially because, I don't know, it feels like wrestling's cool again. For a while it was like uncool, but now it's like way more mainstream. And that's, I think, a really special part. But who are your two like top favorite people that you are just like so like invested in right now?
I would say my all-time favorite is Charlotte Flair. I dressed like her last Halloween.
Yes.
And then I would say my second favorite, probably Becky Lynch. Most of my favorites are going to be newer people since I haven't been watching that long, but Lo has all the history. So
So I actually am really into Bianca Belair right now, and I think her persona is really there for me. As an African American woman too, I love to see the representation. She designs her own ring gear. She's shown as this strong Black woman in the ring, and I just love watching her. And she's just herself. You can tell she's not trying to fit a certain mold. She's just being her. My second favorite, maybe a group. I really love the Undisputed Era right now.
Yes.
I feel like they're just so good and they mesh well together. And sometimes I'm like, are they going to break up? And then other times I'm like, hell no, you can't break them up. But they're just chef's kiss. They're just so good together. I love them.
I know, they vibe really well, don't they?
Yeah.
It's so funny, and especially with all their years of combined experience. They've been wrestling between a lot of them for many, many years. And it's super fun to see how, like, great they vibe off each other and work with one another in the ring. I love them as well. And I also love Bianca Belair. I think she's, we always hear, like, wrestlers say, it's myself, but I'm dialed up really high, right? It's a little over the top, but what I like about her is her realness. And that's how I feel about a lot of people in NXT, actually, to your earlier point. They just have this self-confidence, and this is what it is, and this is who we are, and that's it. So something super special about wrestling. So I can already tell, right, and having been a fan of your show for a while now, I already know how much you guys love wrestling, but you started a podcast.
Yes.
Why?
As Hayleigh mentioned, we had interacted on Twitter, and we've always been friends, but we interacted on Twitter, and I found out she liked wrestling, and I felt like it brought us closer. And then we were working at the same place, and we kind of were like, what if we just did a wrestling podcast?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a wild thought, like, oh, well, we see other people doing it. And then we kind of started researching and seeing what was out there. And
then it happened.
It just happened.
It just happened, yeah.
I still have, like, the screenshots of when we came up with the name.
Yeah.
I was like, I figured it out, because we were going back and forth. We were like, we knew we wanted to bring some type of alcohol, whether it be beer or wine. We knew we wanted to do that, but we couldn't figure out how we wanted to bring everything together. And Hayleigh is a lot more podcast savvy than I am. So she was listening to a lot of podcasts before I was. And which podcast were you listening to where they did the whole beer thing? And that's where you were like, oh, that would be interesting.
I forget what it was. So funny thing is, I don't really like wine. I'm more of a beer person.
Oh, no!
But we were like, you know what? Wrestling Winedown sounds so cute. And I was like, I could learn to like wine for this.
Yes, I actually am a wine fan, but at first, when we first started, I was like a novice in the wine field. I was like, yeah, I know what wine is, but I don't really drink it. But now I'm like mixing it more in because I'm like, on brand, hello.
Right,
you know?
now we get to try all these new wines every week, and it's amazing.
Well, yes. What more could you ask for?
Right.
Best friends, bottle of wine, wrestling. It's the best thing ever. I loved your name. The second I saw it, I was like, oh, this is perfect. I'm like, and they're girls. Oh, yes. I'm so excited. So I had to dive in right away. I think your name is super cute, and it's catchy, and it's easy to remember. And that's what I love so much. And one of the things that really interests me, you guys started, I believe, at the end of March. Is that correct? If I remember my dates right.
Like April, yeah.
Yeah. Right at the end of March, April, which is actually when I started my show as well, funny enough. And I started listening to your stuff, and I'm like, God, these two are just so delightful to hear chat. I'm like, I feel like I'm with my girlfriends. Like, this is wonderful. You have a really cool vibe and everything. And I started to talk to my friends about you. And they were like, wait, what? And I said, yeah, it's Wrestling Winedown. And they're like, wine like alcohol wine? And I was like, yes. And they're like, this is great. I'm like, I know, right? So we started talking about it. And a couple of my friends, JPQ from No Particular Angle podcast, said to me, these two, they're like so positive and poppy. Like your voices are so poppy and like energetic. And you could tell you have a love of wrestling. And I was just talking to my friend Pops from DYWTSB. And he's like, I've been listening to their episodes like low key for like a little bit. And I just like love them both. And I'm like, I told you, like, it's so enjoyable to listen to. And they'd want to know, and I want to know, how do you keep it so positive and so energetic? And it just makes it so enjoyable to listen to. What's the secret? What can you tell us?
I mean, it helps that we're friends.
Yeah.
It helps that, like, before each episode, we just kind of vent to each other about life.
Yeah, we'll, like, come in and we're like, here's what's going on in our life. And I feel like that's the time we let out all the negative energy.
Right.
And then while we're recording, we'll kind of hear ourselves talk and we'll say, okay, this could be phrased a little bit differently because, yeah, there is stuff that we might not agree on in the different companies, but there's still a bright side to it. And I feel like a lot of people, they get upset when you're way too positive.
Right.
But then when you're negative all the time, they're like, well, geez, do they have anything nice to say? So we try and keep it like
a balance.
Yeah, like in the middle somewhere. We obviously want our opinions to be known, and we want our listeners to have their opinions known on the show as well. But we definitely try and keep like a positive light because, I mean, we're not here to complain.
I know. There's lots we like about wrestling. And, I mean, we always complain about the women's division and how it's not getting enough time. But I don't think that that's negativity. You know,
No.
I think
That's just fact.
Yeah.
It is a fact. It's like constructive criticism. And that was one of the things, like, which obviously because I told you about it and you retweeted about it. But when I was speaking to JPQ on his show about you guys, that was one of the things that came to me. I was like, this is it's refreshing and nice to listen to, that it's positive, but you offer like things that are constructive and not like super hard negative. And I'm guilty of that myself because I get so like passionate and I have no filter. I'm Sicilian. It's just what it is. And I try really hard, but I get like down on it and I'm like, I need to be more like Hayleigh and Lowe. And I just find myself listening to your show and being like, yes, constructive criticism. This is what I need in my life, which is why I shouted you out on that show because I just think you guys are awesome. So you're very welcome. So speaking of the women's division, we could correlate to this to what we do. Being women podcasters in the wrestling world can be a little bit difficult, and it can be a very illuminating scene because there's not many of us out there, right? I feel like since WrestleMania, I've found some more, but it's not as big as I would like it to be. So I was wondering your thoughts to being women podcasters in wrestling and how that experience has been for you. Have you found it overwhelmingly positive? Do you, because I feel like for us girls, it's like, oh, well, they're just girls talking about wrestling. Their boyfriends must like it. Their husbands must like it. Their partner must like it, stuff like that, where it minimizes our fandom. So I'm curious as to your thoughts about that.
So when we started researching all of the podcasts, we started researching in November of 2018. That's when we really started figuring out how we were going to market ourselves and all of our material that we were going to have photo-wise on Instagram and Twitter. And we noticed that there just wasn't women in anything. And we were trying to figure out, well, there has to be some type of female wrestling podcast. We came across a couple, but they weren't as big as like the bigger male dominated wrestling podcast. Yeah. So I think for us, that's why we really pushed to create this podcast, a female-led and female-founded wrestling podcast. Whenever we shoot our pictures, we shoot with a woman. Whenever we need sound made or graphics, we go to the same girl. And it's always been like that because we want everyone to see like, wow, they really do work with a team of women. Now, we're not saying that we don't want guys to listen to our podcast, but I feel like women gravitate more towards us because they hear us and they're like, wow, you know, it sounds like we're, like you said, we're just hanging out with our girlfriends. Yeah, right. And when you listen to male voices talking about wrestling, you might be like, well, I can't really relate to what they're saying. But, you know, if you listen to a female voice, you might be like, oh, yeah, I see what she's saying. And she sounds like me. Yeah. So,
we definitely met so many women who are interested in wrestling just because they want to talk about it, but they're not going to go to their guy friend and be like, oh, my God, wrestling, you know? Yes. Like, they don't want to talk to girls about women's wrestling, you know, all of it.
And I noticed, like you said, since WrestleMania, it seems like there's more female fans that feel comfortable coming out and saying they like wrestling. The people I think of are the Wrestle Babe, the Wrestle Bays. They have a whole band of women who are all over the world, and I think they came together all for WrestleMania. I know they went to TakeOver, but they're very positive and enlightening, and that's what I had first noticed when I decided I would venture into the wrestling side of Twitter, that they had a strong presence and that they were very positive, and I've followed them ever since because I think it's just so important to have that female representation, whether it be on a podcast or a YouTube video, or even if it's just like a Twitter DM group. It's nice to have someone to listen to or talk to that you can relate to, whether it be just an interest or it's that you're both women.
Yep.
I totally agree. And I find it so nice when, you know, we see a few come out and then they get some traction going, and then more people are like, well, if they could do it, I can too, right? And that's the thing that I'm hoping that we get in 2020, more female fans truly embracing this voice, because we have one, and we're different, right? It just because we're women doesn't mean we can't like wrestling, and that's what I'm hoping, you know, your show, my show, and other females that have awesome podcasts will do the same thing and just give the light, like, not only can we hang with the boys, but we can have our own stuff and we can have our own opinions, and it's not because someone's dragging me to it, right? I just love it because I do. So I find that really awesome. So from your perspective, what has been the best thing since you began Wrestling Winedown that's happened?
I think just connecting with so many wrestling fans. I think, you know, before I didn't have any wrestling friends. Lo was my first wrestling friend. And so now we can just hop on Twitter or Instagram and connect with so many people who have similar opinions and interests with us.
I think, too, connecting with fans online or in person. I've met people in person who like wrestling, and I'll be like, oh, I have a podcast called Wrestling Winedown, and they're like, oh, I've heard of it. And I'm like, what? Like, you heard of it?
Crazy, right?
I think how many, you know, when you put a message out there, you put a product out there, how many people actually listen to it? You might not know they're listening, but they are. And that's what's really interesting about Twitter as well. We'll get random tweets from people and they're like, we just listen to the show. We listen every week. And I'm like, well, that's great. I didn't know you listened.
Right.
It's fun for that reason. Absolutely. Yeah. And for you guys, why should people listen to Wrestling Winedown? What's the good information on that?
Well, I think like we said before, you know, we're an all women's founded wrestling podcast. We tie in wine, we tie in word on the street. So that's our aspect of kind of like WWE rumors and, you know, what's going on outside the ring. And I think that those two things make us unique and stand out.
I think being like women our age in our early 20s is something that makes us unique as well, because a lot of women that I've noticed that are on Twitter, on wrestling Twitter, are in their early 20s or they're about to be in their 30s. And that helps us connect with them as well, I think, because we're closer to their age. We're not like in our 40s or younger. I don't know why we'd be younger talking about wine, but
we don't want to know about that. Keep that to yourself.
But I think also too, female podcasts typically tend to be lifestyle and beauty, so they don't typically tend to be sports oriented. So I think that also makes us unique.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with that. As we're saying goodbye to 2019 and hello to 2020, what are your goals for your podcast? Do you have any?
I have one that I just thought of off the top of my head. We would love to have Renee Young on our show. Like,
yes,
we have been.
Yep.
Oh my God! So Renee Young is actually in Las Vegas. Like, she lives here, and I had listened to her speak in a podcasting class that we have on our campus, and I remember my friend who's actually enrolled in the class, because I wasn't. She was like, "Oh, Renee Young is coming in," and I was like, "Oh my God, Renee Young!" I was like, do you know who she is?" And she was like, "Yeah, she has the Regular Girls podcast." I was like, "No, she's the first WWE female commentator." I was like, "I have to be there." So I went, I listened to her, and this was before our podcast even started. I think it was like a month before.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "We're starting this wrestling podcast called Wrestling Winedown right after WrestleMania." She's like, "Oh, that's cool." And then I remember we kind of were like, okay, well, we want her on the show, but we don't know like how to really get in there. So we've been like tweeting her, whatever. And then we sent her a question for WWE Backstage. I guess they did like a question segment, and she answered it. Oh my God.
Yeah.
She knows.
It was amazing.
Isn't that the best when they do that?
That's one of our goals,
Yeah.
I think, is to have her on the show, because she's just, I feel like when she's on her podcast, Regular Girls podcast, and she's on any WWE programming, she's just herself. She just, and even on Instagram, I love her cooking videos. She's just so down to earth. Like, I just want to be her friend, because she's herself. And I feel like a lot of, like we mentioned earlier, a lot of superstars, you don't find that. They're very like, this is us when we're in the ring, and then when we're outside the ring, we might be a little bit different, but we're not going to show you that. And I just really appreciate how she really shows all the elements of her life, including, you know, when she's home, when she's cooking, when she's with Jon Moxley, whatever. She shows her fans. I feel like that really makes her personable.
I agree. I would say our other goals would be to connect with more listeners, you know, keep growing our social media outreach. We really want to meet wrestling fans in person. That would be definitely amazing for like a meetup somewhere in Las Vegas.
Yeah, so since Double or Nothing is coming back, we're really thinking about doing like a wine night where, you know, gather a couple fans and just kind of talk about wrestling. I feel like, you know, different events that they've had for wrestling during WrestleMania weekend and TakeOver, they're always so great, but it never really happens in Las Vegas. And I feel like last time we missed out because I was graduating, we were out of town. I went to Double or Nothing, but we didn't attend StarCast. And we were like, oh, God, we really want to go, but we just couldn't make it. So this time we are there. We're in there like swimwear.
Good. I'm glad. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah. And then we also definitely want to grow our wine portion of the show. Like partnerships, and we want to try more wine, basically. Now that we're both wine fans.
Right.
You know.
It's the right thing to do.
We have to take advantage of this.
I mean, absolutely. You should definitely try to get some of Chris Jericho's Little Bit of the Bubbly and try that. I think that would be perfect for your segment about wine and make it bigger. It's not quite wine, but it's close. We're in the same ballpark, right? You guys, it has been an absolute pleasure for me to talk with you. And one of the last things that I've received several compliments when I was talking to my friends about to give to you was about your website and your marketing strategy and what you have on Instagram and your promotional photos and how smart that is. And I wanted to pass that along. So I was hoping that you would share with the listeners where they can find you, of course, on Twitter and Instagram and any other social platforms, and where they can listen to your show, because it's all about you guys today. So please let them all know.
Well, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at WWDcast. And then we put all of our podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher,
Google Play, and wherever else you listen to your podcast.
Everywhere.
We are there.
And we love connecting with people on Twitter, Instagram. So be sure to follow us,
Right.
DM us, we respond.
That's true, they do. I would know. No, they definitely do. And please definitely give them a follow. As always, you guys, everything is in the description. And of course, will be on the tweet when I send it out for you to find. Very easy. So you won't have to say to me, Queen, I forgot to follow them. No, it'll be there and you won't be able to. So ladies, again, thank you so much for joining me today. Been such a pleasure. Keep kicking butt in 2020. And I can't wait to see what's in store for Wrestling Winedown.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Oh, you're so welcome. My pleasure. And as always, listeners, have a great rest of your day, and please be kind to one another.